This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Be honest. When's the last time you had a homemade meal? We get it. Between meetings, workout classes, and the kids' after-school sports, who's got time to cook? That's where HelloFresh comes in. No matter how busy you get, HelloFresh has everything you need to get an easy, home-cooked meal on the table. With flavor-packed recipes like Parmesan herb-crusted salmon, you'll be filling your kitchen with the cozy aromas of a homemade meal in no time. So go ahead, try HelloFresh. It's homemade, made easy. Learn more at HelloFresh.com.
It's Kelly Clarkson here to talk all things Wayfair, the best place to buy furniture, decor, and anything else you can think of to create a home you absolutely love. I know when I shop with Wayfair, I find options for every style, whether I'm feeling boho or farmhouse, modern, traditional, French country. I can find exactly what I need for my home and more. No matter your space, style, or budget, shop Wayfair.com to make your home way more you.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
The Commonwealth Games is back. Scotland saved the day. Glasgow will stage a slightly slimmed down version next summer. In recent episodes of Great British Bosses, we've heard from the Commonwealth Games Federation and the Scottish organisers about the importance of the Games in the sporting calendar. I'm John.
And I'm Michael. So what do the other nations think? And specifically, what do the other home nations think? And how sustainable is the format as the Commonwealth Games Federation are now asking for interested bidders to host the Centenary Games in 2030, 2034 and beyond? Let's find out.
Hi, my name's John Steele. I'm chair of Commonwealth Games England.
Take us back. You took charge of Team England, Commonwealth Games England, after Birmingham, an amazing games. Michael and I were there and absolutely loved it. Take us back to the moment when you found out that 2026 wasn't going to be held in Australia anymore.
Yeah, not a pleasant memory, that one. And we've had some good news since then. But yeah, going back to that, it surprised everybody. And that's from Commonwealth Games Federation, Katie Sadler, everybody there. It was a shock because there were no indications, I think, outside Victoria that it wasn't going to happen. And of course, or the timing of it meant that it was then short notice to get another games online, and it was shock really, and trying to work out what it meant to us, whether there wouldn't be a games, what that games might look like, obviously where that games would be. So I think the whole movement was surprised, shocked, and had to really show a bit of resilience in aligning quickly and thinking, well, where do we go from here?
And I suppose what was interesting was that it was a one of the bigger nations. It wasn't a small nation that had decided to bid for the games and had won it, and people were a bit uncertain about whether it would happen. This was Australia.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps that's one of the difficulties with venues at the moment. Of the last 6 games, 5 have either been in Australia or Britain. And that tells a bit of a story about affordability and a story about spreading the venues across the Commonwealth, which would be everyone's desire. But yeah, I think if you're expecting a nation to drop out in that way, it wouldn't be what we might describe as one of the superpowers of the Commonwealth movement.
Did we need a reset, or has the Glasgow plan just put a sticking plaster over what has happened with the Commonwealth Games?
I think reset's actually probably a good word, but I think we need more than that. I think we need an overhaul, a complete review of what Commonwealth sport is and what it can be. I think the work that Ian Reid and John Doig have done, and I know Phil Batty and George Black on the organising committee will make it a wonderful games in Glasgow. But what Ian and John did with Glasgow in a very short period of time is quite amazing. Now, the opportunities it presents is it is reduced in size. We know it's down to 10 sports. They've said things like opening ceremonies and other things that they've brought down in terms of cost, and some things won't be happening. But actually, you know what? I think it's going to show the art of the possible. And it is, when you look at mega events and you look at the scale of the investment in some of the ceremonies and the things that wrap around the sport itself, we probably have to ask ourselves, is that value? Because it's a bit like an arms race. It's sort of the next Olympics, Paralympics, Commonwealth Games has to be better than the last one. And sometimes less is more. And I think this is an opportunity to use Glasgow as a platform for really reviewing and creating some radical change.
I was just about to use the phrase arms race to you. It's one that I've used on our podcast many times when discussing these major events. Do you think then, when you talk about this being an opportunity to change Commonwealth sport, that we need to reimagine everything around it, that we could head to spin-off events, we could do things across different nations? This idea of 10 days of competition, 70 odd nations, 4,500 athletes all coming together is now probably in the past?
I think that's where we should start a review. We should ask ourselves questions. That one way of doing this is we look at what we did do and we tinker around with it a bit. Another way of doing it is wiping the slate clean and thinking, what's the art of the possible in the future? And what does younger generation want from Commonwealth sport? What are the opportunities for Commonwealth sport, not just in the competition, but in terms of social benefits? And, at the moment, we've got an incredible platform for things like inclusivity. This is a major event which has para athletes and non-para athletes competing together. Now that's incredible in terms of inclusivity, and that sort of opportunity to build on that in terms of inclusivity, social impact. Every government in the world at the moment is looking at sport as a vehicle to, potentially economic benefits, but social impact is huge, be it getting nations active. And, if you look at our own government, when the Get Active strategy is all around sustainability, inclusivity, and of course, getting a nation more active. So actually, the Commonwealth Games can play a huge part in that based on it's very inclusive already. So we have the ability to move forward. But just doing what we did before with a few changes will not be the answer.
So the fact that the CGF have said they want interested bidders to come forward for the Centenary Games in 2030, how likely is it?
Well, they've announced, as you know, the collaborative host selection process, which is looking at building on Glasgow and saying to nations and venues, think about partnering, think differently. Birmingham, in terms of the finances, contrary to some popular belief, was very successful. It made really good money. And I'm pretty confident that Glasgow will be able to say the same thing. So as well as social impact, employment, global profile, all of these things, the hard financial facts are that you can make money from a Commonwealth Games. So let's put that aside. If it's the right model, this isn't something which should scare potential venues.
And what are other nations saying to you about the fact that they want to host? We know that England is not going to host for the foreseeable future, nor is Australia. They've got Olympics to put on.
Well, I'm not going to speculate because Chris Jenkins and Katie Sadler will be talking to various venues about what could happen in 2030. I think there's a real opportunity in 2030 to talk about, which is the centenary of the Games, to have a cycle of Commonwealth sport. So when Glasgow finishes, we don't just say, right, in 4 years' time, we'll see everyone then. We really think about something happening every year somewhere in the Commonwealth. That doesn't necessarily mean it's people travelling and competing. It could be within the domestic sporting calendar, but it's branded as Commonwealth sport. And that's having social impact. It's having community impact in all the different countries. And we know that sponsors are attracted by the reach of sport into communities. And Birmingham is a great example of that, where for educating young people, for using it as a vehicle for social change, it's hugely effective, the power of sport. So let's make a 4 year centenary cycle building up to a crescendo in 2030. And that might have a couple of youth games in it. You know, our sports in Team England tell us that the youth games is hugely important in their talent pathway, where they introduce at a certain point in the talent pathway multi-sport competition to young athletes. And that's hugely valuable if those athletes are going to go on to be Commonwealth Games, Olympic or Paralympic athletes.
And what does that cycle look like then, in your view? Are we talking about maybe a Commonwealth shooting championships in India and maybe a Commonwealth cricket tournament in Australia? Are we talking about a Commonwealth combat sports event, for example?
Well, it could be. And that's the sort of places. Now, when they're scrutinised, there may be, well, option A, not possible. But actually option B could be. And if you did what you've just described, Michael, the some countries might get involved who couldn't potentially feel they would afford a games or even a youth games, main games or even youth games. But actually, there's one sport we might quite like to do a Commonwealth Festival centenary shooting competition, whatever it might be. So I'm not saying anything specific here, but when we reset and reconsider the art of the possible, we need to get really broad.
And are these just your views at the moment, or when you speak to your other chairs at Commonwealth Games across the globe, are they having similar feelings? Do they have similar views as you have?
Yeah, I think it's recognised, and maybe the Victoria situation was a wake-up call that although that wasn't the way we'd want to have done it, we do need to think really carefully about the future. And what's been successful in the past really won't be the reach and impact that we want in the future. Therefore, we need to think differently now. Just rejigging and fine-tuning a historic model will not be enough.
And we've heard from Scotland and other nations about the importance of the Commonwealth Games Federation, the importance of the Commonwealth Games. Why is it still relevant, John?
I think that one of the challenges that any future games will have to do is tackling the thorny topic of colonialism, because Olympics and Paralympics don't have to explain their origins or their past in the same way as the Commonwealth movement does. And we know that there's a difficult and very sensitive side to colonialism. It essentially boils down to one country invading another. And that is not a good thing. But unless we address that and talk about it, and talk about Indigenous reconciliation, and a lot of work has been done on this, we won't be able to move forward because there'll always be the shadow of our origins. But the truth of it is, if we can do that, the Commonwealth movement in a disintegrating world, and by that I mean disintegrating, our global politics is less integrated, our partnerships are less integrated than they've ever been. Sport has a role to play, and especially the Commonwealth movement, in a network of countries that can support and help each other in all sorts of adversity. And sport is an amazing bridge builder and platform maker in that. So I think there are some key things which all countries appreciate need to be addressed. One is our origins and getting a truthful narrative about where we go now. The phoenix from the ashes, in terms of Commonwealth may have started in a difficult way, but my goodness, now it's so valuable to the countries within it.
You know what? I think you're the first person that's ever kind of tackled and used the word colonialism and talked about the history of the Commonwealth Games in the way that you have, in the honest way that you have. And it's made me think that actually by maintaining a Commonwealth Games, by ensuring there is a future for the movement, that it could be used for education above anything else, really.
Well, definitely. And there are various programs. I mean, one thing the Commonwealth movement, I hope, will improve at, and I know Chris Jenkins, as chair of CGF, is trying to do this, but sometimes we're not good at saying the great things that go on. And some of the development in schools and with young people in the Commonwealth movement is outstanding, because what better to teach about historic um, situations that could be said were not great. They weren't where we would want to be today, but we need to learn from them. And what's happened from those situations is we've rebuilt partnerships. We've been really honest about what was wrong and what was right. And therefore, this generation can go, well, we won't go there again. If we tread on eggshells or walk around it, it's always going to be there, but it'll never feel like it's been addressed.
Yeah, and I feel that you're the first person that's addressed it head on, if you like, and maybe in this forum, on this platform, actually telling that story about the good work that is happening, because we know about what has happened in the past.
Well, the CGF are doing some amazing work, and the impact. And Birmingham is actually an example. If we just use obviously the most recent games, the impact in terms of schools and using the Commonwealth movement and the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham to sport for development, but also education in schools. I think that's a really important part of the legacy.
Before we move on, the fact that Scotland are staging it and have stepped in, and we know why Scotland wanted to do that, because it's important to their athletes. You're in charge of Team England. Is there that importance to represent England at a Commonwealth Games for the athletes?
Huge. I mean, this is something that I don't know why I was shocked, but I was quite shocked at the athlete's voice when the Victoria announcement came out, which was how important the Commonwealth Games had been to them, how proud they were to represent England. And you get that across all the home nations. There's something special about representing your country. Obviously, Team GB, Paralympics GB has immense pride as well, but representing your country is something very, very special. And also for non-Olympic and Paralympic sports. So, netball, this is the peak of their competition and their talent pipeline, and it's so important to these athletes. So let's be under no illusion, it's hugely valued by athletes, and also as well as just being able to say you've competed at Commonwealth Games, and if you're very fortunate and talented, you've won a medal, but also actually the development piece. I've talked about the youth games, but the way it's been a platform for so many athletes to move on to other things as well.
Let's look at the Scotland Games. We know you mentioned about the 10 sports. What kind of team will Team England be sending? And obviously some of those sports, you mentioned netball's definitely there. We know gymnastics, we know it's swimming and athletics, but obviously some sports missed out. You're a rugby man. Rugby sevens is not involved as well. But what kind of team will, well, yeah, I know we're a year away, but what kind of team will Team England be sending?
Hopefully a really strong, successful one. All the sports that are included were really, really engaging as soon as it was announced, and were straight on to, right, what do we need to do? Very short running period, obviously. So we will put in a very strong team, the strongest possible. And we know that the games, I mean, 2014 was a wonderful games. You guys were there, I was there. It was fantastic. I think, as I said before, Ian Reid and John Doig have done an amazing job, and a realistic, pragmatic job about, look, these are the venues we've got. This is the art of the possible. We haven't got time to build. Let's make the best games we can with the venues we've got, and I think they'll do a wonderful job. I think it will be an incredible time, and Team England, we will do everything we can to support and take the best team possible.
What did you say to the sports that weren't there?
That was a really difficult call, but actually, I was expecting quite a sort of backlash. They were very honest in saying, "Look, we're really disappointed here," but they got it. They understood that actually Glasgow, this wasn't political about we don't want this sport in or we don't want that one. It was actually about what is possible with the infrastructure existing and the logistics that need to be arranged. So, although there was a lot of disappointment, they did it. They expressed that disappointment in a very dignified and sensible way.
Were England ever in the running to step in at any point? Was it discussed? Was it a rerun of Birmingham? Was that ever on the cards?
No, not seriously. I think it just wouldn't work psychologically in terms of, fans, athletes, everybody to repeat the same thing from 4 years before. I don't think that would feel right.
You're listening to Great British Bosses from Anything But Footy. We're talking to the chair of Commonwealth Games England, John Steele.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
John, let's talk a little bit about you. You mentioned, obviously, a rugby man, a military man as well. But how did you come into the sphere of Olympic, Paralympic and Commonwealth sport? What was the attraction there?
I'd love to say it was some sort of career planning genius, but it really wasn't. I just sort of fell into it a little bit.
Don't we all?
Yeah, it was chance. And back in 2005, I'd spent a lot of time as a player, coach, director of rugby, and I sort of wanted to change. And I was just approached by a headhunter for the chief exec role at UK Sport, and Sue Campbell, Baroness Sue Campbell, who was then the chair of UK Sport, chaired the panel, interviewed me, and I was very fortunate that she took a chance, and the rest history. I've thoroughly enjoyed pretty much 20 years in the Olympic and Paralympic environment before I switched to across to Commonwealth Games.
And the fact as well that you were a winning coach, a European Cup winning coach with Northampton Saints at rugby, to then become a chief executive. For me, they seem totally different roles.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, John. They were, and I suppose the part I had to get, I was on the Northampton Saints board, so I understood a bit about governance, and I did a little time after my director of rugby as operations director there and things. So I had broader experience, but yeah, it was a jump, and also just not understanding Olympic Paralympic culture. Rugby has its own distinct culture, but it's one sport. This was a multi-sport environment, heavily invested in by government and treasury. So as accountable officer, which the chief exec at UK Sport is, I had to sort of learn pretty quickly.
And did you miss the tracksuit?
Yeah, well, it was getting tight. It's nothing worse than these old blokes in sort of tight tracksuits standing on the side of the pitch, and you think you really need to get a new tracksuit, mate. But in a way, the performance, and this is why I've got a lot of empathy with head coaches and performance directors. It is all consuming. It is a lifestyle where if you have family, you really have to consider how you balance the two, and it's very difficult to balance the two. So our PDs, our head coaches, they do incredible jobs and they're incredibly committed. So actually, I enjoyed the leadership side as opposed to the coaching side. So my coaching style was pretty much leading, really, and I had other technical coaches. So I enjoyed creating cultures, creating successful strategy, implementing. So it was a natural step for me, really.
Are you proud of your time with UK sport through those cycles of Beijing and London, or with, 10, 12 years on, do you look back and think actually there's some things that I might have done differently there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you they say never look back, but you should look back to reflect and learn. And at that time, it was my first gig as a chief exec, so I was very fortunate because I had Sue Campbell as a chair, and I had a really good senior leadership team with people like Liz Nichol and Peter Keane and Tim Hollingsworth. These are all people who've gone on to have major leadership roles in sport. So I was lucky I had a great team, but yeah, there was a lot we did which we could have done differently. But what we weren't scared of was change. And it feels, well, it is a long time ago. I guess it's 20 years ago. But actually, we weren't that successful as a sporting nation then. We sort of take for granted now, It's only 96 where the famous one gold medal in Atlanta. And then Sydney's slightly better, Athens, still outside the top 10. We knew we needed to try stuff. And Sue gave us a license to do that. And we had the brains of Peter Keane, the experience of Liz Nichol, and we tried stuff. We a completely different approach to a lot of things, including talent ID, working with national governing bodies in a completely different way. And we went into Beijing with sort of outside the top 10 in terms of medal table. Not that that's everything, but that was a performance wasn't good at that time, so it was a focus. And we ended up fourth in Beijing when we targeted top eight, and then of course London, which we'd said we'll be top four. We'd already achieved that in Beijing, so there's a little bit of where do we go from here? Because the superpowers at the time, USA, China, Russia, well, the common thinking was we're never going to beat them, so you can't get higher than fourth, and we'd just got fourth before a home game, so we could have snookered ourselves here, but fortunately we managed to improve on that for London. But yeah, I think that phase was pioneering time, really. We were trying different things to try to create a better performance environment so that our athletes could perform.
We talk a lot, don't we, these days about our mental well-being of athletes and some of the support that is available for athletes now. Was that maybe missed at that point?
Well, that's often talked about, that the no compromise philosophy back then was about somehow ignoring athlete needs. And that's certainly not how I remember it. No compromise was about we're going to create an uncluttered environment for athletes so that they are the main focus. And because, we were plucky losers before that. We were sort of, oh, well, we're GB, aren't we? We never quite make it, but hey, we enjoy it. You look now at the interviews after Paris. It was wonderful how our young athletes expect to do well. Now they don't always do well, and it's not everything in terms of medals, but that's what sport is about, trying to win. That's one of the fundamental principles, and enjoying that experience. So, was there enough focus on athlete well-being? We thought so at the time, and there was never any sort of conscious acknowledgement of over harsh behaviour. But I think in hindsight, we could have done more. We had performance lifestyle in the institute and other ways of looking after athletes, but I think we could have done more in terms of looking after our athletes. And thankfully, over the next couple of cycles, that's got a lot better.
You mentioned Athens, John, and I was surprised that there wasn't much of a fallout after Paris for the fact that Team GB in the Olympics finished in the medal table its worst position since Athens 2004. We finished seventh. Netherlands and France, as European nations, were ahead of us in the table. Now, I don't want to talk something up, but that's not what I do. I'm an Olympic fan, and I want us to do well. But is that a slight concern? Or is it actually, look, we still won the same amount of medals. It doesn't really matter whether they're gold or silver or bronze.
Well, it depends why. So as most people know, we got a lot of silvers and less golds. Now, when it's quite a one-dimensional KPI, the medal table, because it's based on how many golds you've won. Now, if part of the overall target for Olympic and Paralympic sport is to make the nation feel proud, to impact on our society in a positive way, to help develop young people, then actually more medals across more sports is a much better measure of success. Less individuals, but winning gold. So we're higher up the medal table. Well, yeah, of course we want to do well in the medal table. I'd never want to see us outside the top 10. But actually, that's a very one-dimensional way of looking at it. More medals, more moments where we've all done it. Watching, you go, wow, how inspiring is that individual? Now they may have come sixth, they may have come eighth, they may have got bronze. It doesn't really matter. It's about those moments and then harnessing those moments to drive social impact and pride for the nation. So, look, I mean, do we want to be as high as we can in the medal table? Yes. Is it everything? Definitely not.
So should we follow the Americans and actually change the way that we do the medals? Because
I like that.
The Americans
Yeah.
have always done it the other way. And I did talk to other journalists when I was out in Paris because they were saying, well, if you look at the table, John, we're okay because we won the same amount of medals. And I was like, yeah, but you can't change it just because we didn't win any golds for this time. But actually, if we're now saying that is what is now more important, that gold is not necessarily the most important thing, and it is about medals, then we go right from now on. We're all going to do it. The BBC will do it. We'll all follow, and we're just going to do it on the amount of medals you win.
Well, it's difficult because if the IOC and the IPC are saying it's about gold medals, then that seems to be the global judgment call. But actually, if you look at the UK sport strategy of medals and more, it's identified some time ago that it is more than just gold medals. And it's identified winning well, it's identified social impact as part of its role, not to maybe harvest the moments uh, that create social impact, but to create those moments. And then other organisations like Sport England, home country sports councils, development bodies use those moments, athletes at schools, athletes in communities, to inspire a younger generation and have social impact. So I think that there has been a strategic shift over the last couple of cycles, and that might not be evident when we're all in the glow of the games and the excitement of the games.
So just before we wrap up, let's go back, if you like, to where we started, but staying on the theme of medals. Do you want to be the chair of a England team that are top of a medal table in Glasgow next year ahead of those pesky Aussies?
Uh, I'd love that to happen, but what's more important is that people say to me, you know what, we were proud of your athletes. They behaved in a way, they competed in a way, they gave everything, they fulfilled their potential, and the culture was really strong. And you know what? That means more because you can top a medal table, and people don't think you did it well. And it's more than medals. It's more than winning. And if you'd said that to a young John Steele when I was a 21-year-old rugby player, I'd have said nonsense. We've got to go out there and win. But 40 years or 39 years on, how you win is so important.
And finally, from me, I mean, just again, going back to where we started, really. I mean, just so important. You weren't the first chair of Team England that didn't have the opportunity to lead your team into an actual games, because that was fairly close to happening, wasn't it? That we wouldn't have had a Commonwealth Games next year.
Yeah, I think we've got to be honest. When Victoria made that announcement, we all thought that's a very real option. And credits to the Commonwealth Games Federation, and huge thanks to Glasgow for not just talking about it, but taking action to protect the movement. And what they've done is they've given us a great opportunity for a games in 26, but they've given us time, and we must now, as a movement, take the time to reflect on our history, to tell the story of our history, but think about what a modern games and a modern Commonwealth sport movement will look like as we go into the centenary in 2030.
Well, it's been fascinating to hear from you, John. We could carry on literally and talk to you far more, but we won't. We will let you go because you're a busy man, and we can't wait to see you and Team England in Glasgow next year. And as you say, seeing the Commonwealth Games Federation look at themselves, look at the issues that they face, and also looking to the future as well. We can't wait to see what will happen. So, John Steele, Chair of Team England, Commonwealth Games England, thank you so much for talking to Great British Bosses.
Thanks very much, gentlemen.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. Obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors, but they take time and energy, pulling you away from building and shipping. That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups get audit-ready and build a strong security foundation, quickly and painlessly. Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. The platform connects you with trusted experts to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. So whether you're closing your first deal or gearing up for growth, Vanta makes compliance easy. Join over 8,000 companies, including Y Combinator and Techstar startups who trust Vanta. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/simplify. That's VANTA.com/simplify for $1,000 off.